welcome everybody to the dish number 4. These have been really fun, and we will probably keep these going as long as people want to hear things from us. The big news that probably most of you have heard, if you're here now, I'm imagining you're pretty engaged with East Fork. So the big news was that we announced the executive transition that we've been working on for the last 4 months. And it was an amazing process to go through. We did it with Connie, myself, John, and Zoe, who is our new COO of East Fork. And through that process, the big change that emerged, I think most of y'all know, is that East Fork has a new CEO, which is Connie right here. And East Fork has a new board chair, chief strategy officer, which is myself. And John is still the CFO of East Fork, and Zoe's the COO. So those are like the really simple things that changed, and we defined our roles more, and we wrote like very thorough job descriptions. But the real work that happened was everything that sort of led up to that moment. And those last 4 months, we met about 4 hours a week. We had the support of our advisory group, which is a group of folks that have invested in East Fork that we get on calls with monthly or more than monthly, but they were super involved in that process. And then we also used a bunch of other folks from all different backgrounds to give us tools and insights into what it is we're good at doing, what it is we should be doing, what we want to be doing, and how we add value to East Fork. And we spoke with a Berkman assessor, which was very helpful. We talked with an intuitive astrologer, which was also amazing. We did Enneagram kind of deep dives with someone that uses the Enneagram in organizations and organizational structure. We talked with our good friend Marisol Menez from Tepeyac Consulting. It was a tremendous amount of work, a lot of learnings, and I think we all emerged understanding a little bit more about what leadership means as an organization is growing and how we show up every day to do our work. So that was the really big one. Do either of y'all want to speak to that in any more detail or depth? I mean, we're going to get into some of this in the questions, so that's why I don't feel the need to be too detail oriented. But I wrote a very nice blog post, which I think outlines a lot of the big things.
Yeah, I think the one thing that has been really helpful in in that process, we came up with oh man, y'all. So this is I'm really exhausted. I'm feeling really stressed out today. So part of our process in our leadership teamwork was establishing regular check-ins, weekly check-ins, and moments in our agenda where we are just really acknowledging where we're at in any given moment. What I referred to at the beginning of naming your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health at that moment so that your team can be prepared and understanding of your state at any given time. And that's been really helpful. And I've been trying to do that with all of my teams. And it's been interesting to kind of look back at those collectively and over the last 4 months to see which of my team members have been in an anxious state for 3 months straight, and which team members tend to really fluctuate up and down, and then started to figure out what exactly is contributing factors at work that we actually have control over. So just for transparency, I've had a really intense week at work. I'm not feeling awesome, which is why I'm being grumpy and mean to my husband. But at least being able to acknowledge that is, I think, a little bit helpful. But there we go.
A little helpful.
It's helpful. It's all I can offer.
Right over here.
I have valid reasons to be stressed.
Oh, I thought you meant valid reasons to be grumpy at me.
No, to be stressed. I'm
yeah.
not just grumpy at you because you did anything wrong. I'm grumpy because I'm stressed.
Raise your hand if you no.
Agree with me.
No, just understand well, there's some questions here that are going to speak to dynamics, and we're going to talk more about that. But the other big thing that we announced was a bold move on our part to increase our minimum wage to $20 an hour. Before that, it had been $16.50, or was it just 16? It was just 16.
Yeah,
It was 16, which was already above the Asheville living wage standard, which is set in place by an organization here. And we felt like there was more work to do there, and that didn't really take into view the full spectrum of people's experience in lives. And you can survive maybe if you are single and you live in an apartment with lots of friends on that. But if you have other expenses, if you have a family, if you have payments, all of these things, it's very hard. And so John found, through the work that we've been doing to get B Corp certified, which is nearing, hopefully, the culmination of that process, an MIT living wage calculator. And that MIT living wage calculator plugs in a lot more things. And so for that, we decided to choose the living wage for no, I take that back. Our aspiration is to use the MIT living wage calculator for a family of 2 with 2 children, with both parents working. That number is $22.50 or something like that, pretty close to that. That's the aspiration that we'll move to. However, we couldn't make that entire jump in one big step change. So we settled on $20 an hour, which has been something that I've spoken about for a long time as one of my personal aspirations. And it hadn't been a reality until this point. This has changed a lot for us. It added close to $1 million of overhead to our annual overhead, and we definitely are still figuring out how to put all the pieces together from the financing sort of end of it. But it's very exciting. It's a meaningful change for a lot of folks here. One of the things that we've thought a lot about is where we are going to prioritize sort of putting resources in our organization. And one of the things that we've made a conscious decision is to try and move people that are at the lower end of our pay structures or pay bands faster into a place of more stability. And so we focus that energy on the lower end of our pay bands. We did do sort of a full adjustment as we did this, but that's been a sort of core principle that we've focused on.
But Amy, Ruth, to answer your question, so yeah, you can just leave it. So when we increased the minimum wage to $20 an hour, that did mean a shift of all wages, and so that was a lot of work went into that. Our director of people and culture and her team has been building out a document or a roadmap that we're calling SESM, Sustainable Employee Success Model, and that kind of established a pay grade system for people we'd never had that before. We're a brand new organization. So we did the work to kind of identify what were the requirements for pay grades 1 through 6, and everyone adjusted accordingly. But this time, like because we were kind of like a very scrappy group of folks who didn't really have a clear sense of what we were getting into when we first started, there was a lot of adjusting up the pay band that needed to happen. And we did that by kind of really clearly naming the competencies for each of the position of those pay grades. And then also making a very, a measurement that we could apply equitably to the entire company to position someone within that pay band. So yeah, there was impact for the whole company, not just not just entry level employees.
So with that, I think we'll dive into the questions. If you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. Whoever's not talking, we'll keep an eye on the chat. And we have a whole list of questions that you sent in. And we'll kick it off with a question that each of us can answer, I think, this is from Catherine. What was the most helpful practice or exercise you used when restructuring your leadership? I spoke to some of the practices practices and what we did, but I just thought we'd kind of go around the table. We'll start with John on my left, and yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we already spoke to it a bit, but beyond like picking a favorite between like an Enneagram assessment or astrology, like work, I think to me, the important underlying theme was us being able to kind of come together and get to a place where we can unearth any like previous resentments or bad feelings and actually just speak to the truth of the situation and see each other kind of as like the whole humans that we are, and acknowledge that we've all got our strengths and weaknesses and our hurts and our idiosyncratic personality stuff, and just getting to a place where we can try to cut through some of that stuff and speak to underlying truths that we can all get behind and use as a way to just clarify the direction of the business. I think that was how I would sum it up. The Enneagram work was also pretty fun.
Yeah, bouncing off of that, what John just said, a few sort of tactical things that we've tried to put in place is this commitment to clearing conflict within 48 hours. That was something that we didn't have quite as firm a practice in place. So now, and even beyond just clearing the conflict, how you approach that conflict, which is recognizing first and foremost that what you have is a story or a narrative in your head and about how something is or why somebody did something, and assuming best intent versus assuming the worst. There was one slide which I'd love, I don't know, Emily, if Emily's watching, if you can pull it up and put it in, if there's any way to share it, but it was a wonderful slide about, are you above the line or below the line? And above the line is you're assuming best intent. You're assuming people are, you know, for the most part, filled with goodness and all of these things. And below it, you are in a place of defensiveness, in a place of fear, all of these things. And so thinking about that has been incredibly helpful, and it's incredibly simple. I like things simple. And in addition to that conflict clearing has been helpful. We don't always get it, you know, it's never going to be perfect, but it has been super helpful to just say, hey, I have a story in my head about something you said or did. Could you clear that with me tomorrow? You know, take 10 minutes. It's been really good.
I'm below the line right now. I think we can just.
You want to skip this question?
No, I just want to keep the microphone in one place.
Oh, that's really annoying.
What?
Right now.
It's
I
really
read it.
annoying.
It's like one of those things that's just not that new.
I'm acknowledging that I'm below the line and I'm being really easily, so I'm just gonna keep the microphone where it is. Man, it's been a whirlwind. It's been like my most accelerated period of self-introspection. Like, obviously I've done a lot of therapy in my life. I've thought about myself a lot, but never from a way that really asked or required me to hold myself accountable to the ways that I tend to harm people when I am in that below the line place. So I do agree with John that like everything together, like there was no one tool or one thing that you can just introduce to your organization and do it across the board and like everyone comes out a better person. Like that's obviously not how self-work or organizational health work works. Like it's an ongoing process, but I do think we did a good job of kind of bringing in a very complete toolbox that helped us tackle this at every angle. I think for me, the most impactful conversations I had were with Matisse Jimenez, who we've worked with in the past for mediation. Great, thank you. So she with her partner Tamiko Ambrose, they do trainings and coaching work around transformative justice, and part of her practice, so through a handful of conversations with her that were really specific to kind of addressing some of the harmful dynamics that were playing out on our leadership team. I've never been in a situation with someone who was able to really get the truth out of me and like ask me to look at myself and look at the actions that I've done that have caused harm in the past, and then like really made me sit with them and consider them, and then like love myself anyway and figure out how I can do something differently the next time. So through that transformative justice work, I was able to start healing some relationships that were really dysfunctional. And it's been something that just a real shift that I've felt, that I'm excited to continue doing that sort of work. But it was hard, like to really look at yourself in the mirror and be like, yep, not everything you do is good. And that's okay. You're just gonna acknowledge it, apologize, recognize the harm you've caused, not try to change someone's story, say your story is real and valid, and it played out exactly like that, even though my version of it might look different. That's your version, it's real. And let's see what happens next. So that was my most helpful practice or exercise.
This next question, we're gonna hand over to John. It's from Marianne. And Marianne asks, tell us more about your plan to achieve carbon neutrality. Where are you now? Steps you are implementing? Do you also look at using glazes that fire consistently, or has that already been factored in as much as it practical?
Yeah, no, I appreciate this question. This has been a big focus of mine for a while, and then like more intensely recently as we've been going through a certification process with this third-party nonprofit, Climate Neutral. So I can speak to where we are with that. On Earth Day, we announced that we're climate neutral certified, and basically the requirements there are that we go through a pretty thorough carbon footprint analysis process with them, where we're really trying to quantify as precisely as possible what our emissions are here at the factory, what the emissions down at the power plant are we responsible for by the electricity we consume here, and then also what emissions are embedded in our upstream and downstream supply chains, like all the way to the mine where one of our clay minerals comes, down to a UPS delivery to someone's front porch in San Francisco. So it's pretty vast, and just doing that footprint analysis was a good bit of work. So starting with that, we have that analysis. Then we also come up with concrete, actionable short-term emission reduction plans. With Climate Neutral, they wanted kind of two really clear ones that we could act on within a 12 to 24 month time frame. And so we've established some clear reduction guidelines with them to meet those two requirements. And then thirdly, we also bought carbon offsets to offset all the emissions that we quantified for 2020, for the calendar year there. I think so longer term, that's kind of one piece of a longer 5-year carbon plan that we're working on internally. And I think going through that process was really helpful for me, but it also kind of brought up more questions than answers in some senses. Carbon credits are complicated and this kind of abstract financial instrument in some regards that have pros and cons. And I think smart people can tell you about both sides of that. And I think there's more work that we can be doing on that. But longer term, I think, our aspirations are relatively clear insofar as we want to figure out a way to decarbonize our process as much as possible. And that includes loftier goals like trying to figure out ways to fire our kilns without natural gas. That's kind of a pretty big material science technological issue. And then the upstream and downstream emissions are also kind of a big sticky wicket insofar as they're things that are like outside of our control. It's hard to just measure them, let alone control and reduce them. So I think those are the two frontiers that I really see, focusing on our own kind of internal processes, above and beyond just the efficiency, like the things that you bring up of making sure that our pots are firing consistently and we're not losing a lot of pots to like bad glaze quality or something like that. And that's been an initiative kind of since the get-go. There's more reasons than just environmentalism to be efficient with our processes. So yeah, that's kind of the scoop on that.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
This next question is from Zuzuya. With your new larger equipment, are East Fork pieces still considered handmade? This is an excellent question. And we currently don't refer to the pieces as handmade. These pieces are made with industrial processes, and some of those processes have more handwork in them than others. So if it ever says something, it's because we have not found the corner of the website or whatever. We're constantly trying to audit our website and our copy and look at those things to make sure that it's correct. But no, the pieces are not handmade. It's really interesting because, and this is sort of, somebody asked biggest business challenges, how you're addressing it. A few people asked a question similar to that. And this is, for me, was one of my biggest challenges was, I am an embracer of technology and have been the champion of bringing in new manufacturing methods to East Fork over the last 4 years. And this is me speaking as someone who used to be a potter, throwing things with my hands. But I have been the one that has been saying, we need to automate if we are going to do the things that we want to do in the United States. If we're going to pay $20 an hour, we need to have the intention of building one of the most advanced dinnerware facilities in the US if we want to do that profitably. So we have large pieces of equipment that are in Portugal right now, getting ready to ship over here. Some of them that will remove the vast majority of handwork from a piece. And for me, the animating thing, or what I get excited about, is being able to have someone apply for a job here who's maybe got 2 kids at home, they're working 3rd shift at Thermo Fisher, making $15 an hour, and they can come here, do a similar process, get paid $20 an hour, be served lunch and all those things. So for me, that's like, it comes back to the people. But one of the hardest things has been that shift. And how do we navigate when someone's job here is changing? And there is a whole team, the Jigger team, that what they do and how they do it will be replaced by this machine. Now, those individuals are not being replaced because there's so many places for them to go and continue working on different crews in production. But that way of making is changing, and that is hard. And navigating that has been a challenge because we're relatively sensitive humans and want to consider as many things as we can in the decisions that we're making. But for me, I've had to just always come back to that kind of my own fundamental vision and values for why we're doing this. This one will be for Connie. This is from Catherine. Could you tell us more about your strategic decision to collaborate, partner with chefs, food mags, etc.? It seems utterly natural, but I know you thought about it a lot.
We do think about it a lot, but to be very honest, our marketing department has been the most under-resourced, understaffed little department in the entire company. Our small team has done an incredible job with considering how scrappy we've continued to be, just because until this point, until really recently, we've just allocated resources elsewhere and tried to be as kind of organic as possible in the marketing department and used what we had available. So while yes, I have a strategy that mostly lives in my brain, the partnerships that we have ended up doing have come about, as you say, Catherine, like pretty naturally, is after like many years of relationship building with people over time, friends of friends. I wouldn't even call it networking. I as a very visible person, I'm like so deeply shy and introverted and terrible at networking. Like obviously, like I don't deal well with, I get really uncomfortable with meeting new people. I always say things that I don't mean to say. So like the idea of just like cold calling someone and introducing myself and putting myself out there, it doesn't come as naturally to me as maybe I present on the internet. So I've taken like a much more slow and steady approach to slowly building real organic relationships that don't feel transactional first, and then working with people who we really admire to figure out what our shared goals are and what our shared interests are, and then building collaborations around that are really mutually beneficial and share a common mission. And that ends up those collaborations and partnerships that have that deep foundation of relational aspects to it prove to be the most successful, much more successful than any kind of us reaching out to somebody and paying someone a bunch of money to make content. We've tried that a couple times and it hasn't worked out very well. And we're gonna have to figure out how to get better at that eventually. But yeah, it's been a natural occurrence. And then we've really specifically focused on food and beverage right now, just because we thought when we started thinking about like partnering with people across the home, like in interior designers or artists, 2D artists or whatever, it just felt overwhelming. So we were like, let's keep it focused on kitchen and tabletop, chefs, food. That's what we love. All of our little content team all comes from a restaurant, food and beverage, hospitality background. So we're all kind of obsessed, and that service mentality is like deep within our bones. And it's just a lot of talking to friends of friends and sharing ideas. Which is why the way that the influencer community uses the word collaborate to just mean like send free product or pay money to like have that placed in content without any conversation, like it makes me cringe so much. Like for us, collaboration is the true sense of the word, getting together, sharing goals, sharing ideas, coming up with something that feels really good for all parties. Hopefully that answered that, but one day we'll have a beautiful deck to describe that strategy.
This is an easy question for John. This is from Yael. I have the lamest question, but I really would love to know the answer. You're in luck. What platform do you use for keeping your books and doing your accounting? And has this changed over time? If it's changed, what did you start on and migrate to? Asking as a frustrated user of a popular software that shall remain nameless.
Happy to answer this one. So way back in the day, I think right when I came on and started working with East Fork, we were using QuickBooks Online to manage our books. And that is still the case today, though we are in the process of switching over to a bigger ERP software. We're going with SAP by design. And that should be going live for us probably in the second half of this year at some point. To be honest, from like an accounting perspective, QuickBooks Online has like worked pretty well for all my needs. The move to SAP is driven more by wanting to like integrate production management, inventory forecasting, raw material ordering with finance processes in a more streamlined way. But we've kind of been making it work with QuickBooks Online. And I don't know if that's the nameless software to which you're referring. But yeah, that's how we're putting it together.
Your team is really good at their job. So.
Yeah, we got a good crew, and I think, to me, the record keeping is important, but I think as long as you meet kind of basic requirements, the more energy you can expend on kind of budgeting, forecasting, financial analysis, actually like doing the stuff you want to do instead of just making sure all the dollars are getting accounted for and money's not going missing, like that. Yeah, so QuickBooks really like lets us do that, and then a lot of our like budgeting and nitty-gritty stuff we can do externally and spreadsheets, and yeah.
This is a quick one. Jess asked, will EF Flea come back? It's not on the list, it's up in the questions here. There's no plans for EF Flea to come back soon, right? Or there's plans for it to come back soon?
Yeah, I can just answer that question.
Sure,
yeah.
Answer it.
It's I don't know if I would call that an easy to answer question. We do have plans for East Fork Flea to come back. We're building a new website to adjust for that. We're building out basically a platform on our website where people can go and upload items to our website, and it can all be managed on our site. It's certainly, and yes, we absolutely will share this session. It's East Fork Flea though. I know that like I've gotten myself in some, when I am in my below the line moments and I'm on my phone, like trying to deal with like kids who are screaming at me and transitioning from work to home. And I'm looking at Instagram when I shouldn't be. And then I see things that like hit a nerve. Like I do a really bad job sometimes of being overly reactive in the moment and like responding on the internet. I'm trying to do a better job at that because I know it makes my team like really anxious. So I'm trying not to do that, but like it's the flipping and selling situation on the internet is something that we're talking a lot about internally right now. I wish that I could, I had like here's what the company statement is about it. But I don't have that yet because there's so many factors that are going into this conversation. And while I have this opportunity, I want to say that like we love to see the trading happening, and we love to see pots continuing to be used, rather than like ending up at Goodwill or the landfill. We love to see pots going from one home to another. We love being able, even if someone is like, I'm in a really shitty financial situation, I want to put them on eBay and like turn a little profit, like that feels fine too. Like we have nothing against like the resale market. The thing that we're really struggling to figure out how to address is when customers abuse that and over purchase immediately to flip something or turn a profit on it or to trade it, and all of those resources are then like taken away, like all of our careful allocation and consideration of making sure that pots end up in areas where new customers can acquire things, rather than the same folks who have a hoard of pottery available to trade are the only ones who are getting access to those things. And then with the real thing that's tricky is that our customer care team ends up being like kind of the battering, they take a pretty serious beating from a handful of folks who get really angry and entitled and cross a lot of boundaries. And so we're trying to figure out internally how we can set some boundaries between our customer care team and our sales associate team and customers to make that relationship feel safer, because we never want to put our team in a place where they're having to spend upward of 12 hours a week just dealing with one person and getting a lot of really angry vitriol. And so sometimes when I try to speak out against that, it can be hard on the internet because it gets taken out of context. But I'm always like kind of coming from this place of like wanting to defend the emotional security of our team members. And it's weird. Like I have a feeling that no one who's on this Zoom right now is this type of customer, but people do get really, really mean and nasty and say some really awful things to people who are just trying to do their jobs. And so that is what we are trying to, that's why we have been slow to really put out our, here's what East Fork says about East Fork Flea. I don't know. It's a trigger spot for a lot of us.
This next question is from Rosie. Have you ever thought about buying other small sustainable brands? And I'll answer this and say, I think about it all the time. However, I keep those thoughts to myself because I know that the folks sitting on either side of me, as well as many outside of this room, their minds would just explode if I were to actually try and push something like that through. The answer is the complexity that it takes to do what we're doing right now is a lot, and we're not funded in a way that we can do that. And it's just East Fork is an organically growing business for the most part. By that I mean we're not trying to rocket ship to the moon at all costs. And so the companies that are doing these strategic acquisitions, for the most part, are if they are a startup, they've raised a huge amount of capital to do that, and they have more people, and it's a totally different thing. And so that's not where we're at. But in the future, 100%, I love that idea, and I like the idea of sharing Esports resources with other small businesses, and that is something that that I do, and that we do, which is if there's folks that want to know something, I'm always happy to get on the phone with someone, whether it's pottery related or just business related, and then occasionally I'll rope in, somebody else to talk with them. But that's something that I personally like to do. So.
And I will say that I think that John and I both in our self-examination of where our skills and weaknesses are. I'm not trying to entirely speak for John, but this came up I think a lot is that especially for me, is that Alex sometimes does have these like big wild hare-brained ideas that he keeps to himself until he doesn't. Like obviously we live together. Sometimes he will share one with me and I'll hear it. And I need to get better at remembering that like East Fork as it is now was an absolutely harebrained idea of Alex's. And when he first said it, I was really dismissive of it. And a lot of the ideas that he's had, I've been dismissive of at first. So I'm trying to be better at being, I don't know, I'll never be as optimistic as Alex, but I'm trying to be better, at least like imagining a world of possibilities in the way that Alex can. Just sometimes I just need to like be in the right frame of mind to hear those ideas.
And that my answer to that question also speaks to Arena, who said, I apologize if I've butchered any of your names today. How are you all seeking sustainable company growth to meet demand while, and then it was cut off, but that's the kind of thing, that tension exists constantly, which is that we're growing relatively quickly for the type of organization that we are, and we're constantly balancing what is too fast, primarily what's too fast for people's sanity, and that is something that we struggle with, and we go back and forth, and it's just a tension that we will wrestle with, and I don't think we're not going to get away from it. It's just part of it. So we try to be open to those conversations, and have those conversations and adjust plans if it seems like people are getting burnt out. We had a plan to make and sell a lot more this year than we realized we could do comfortably, and we adjusted that plan and we brought it back, and we're still growing a lot. We're just not growing quite as much as we thought we were going to grow. So yeah. Next question. I've been taking a lot of these. I apologize. How are you all seeking? Do you ever see the factory moving out of Asheville for the ability to sustain growth? That was asked by my friend Mark Bell. Congratulations on the new gig, dude, at Fireclay Tile. So no, not really. What we do see is in a couple of years, picking up the whole thing from the building that we're in right now, and we're in another 30,000 square foot building a couple miles from here. That's not optimal, obviously. We make things and then drive them over to the warehouse. Pretty soon we're going to be just making and bisquing here, driving them over to the warehouse in bisque format, glazing them, firing them, QCing, shipping. We did that because it was a lot easier to make a smaller investment, get our production volume up, get to a stable place over the next couple of years, and then pick everything up and put it down in a permanent home that is either a large building that exists or a building that we build on a campus. So we have visitors and tours, and we can have a childcare, and we can have a restaurant or restaurants. It's like a little mini Disney World for clay and all things clay and making and home, and have an expanded small batch studio. So that's kind of the dream. But Asheville is mountainous, but there's plenty of flat land to build a 100,000 square foot factory around here. So we're fine one. But we don't have plans at the moment to do anything other than that. John, you want one of these?
What do you think would be good? I can't tell if this last one is addressed to me particularly, or
The disagreement?
yeah, or is it about like y'all? Do you want to go into that one?
I think we've answered that. Miranda asked, has there ever been a business disagreement that affected a person dynamic between Connie and Alex? How did you navigate? You're watching it, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, John, you can talk about that if you want.
I mean,
I
we
think I
can.
misread that as like my dynamic with like the third wheel.
Just third wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the dynamics between all of us have changed over the years. Like, they are not what they were in the beginning, and I think that our our friendship and respect and is deeper in a lot of senses, but we also we don't see John as much as we used to, and yeah, these are like the really big, hairy things that we navigate and work. That's what we've been doing over the last 5 months, essentially. You know,
I think, yeah, like on the positive side, like I think some of the stuff we've touched on right here, when I think about like business disagreements or like us sort of disagreeing at kind of a higher level strategic side of things, like to some extent, I think that yields the balance and thoughtfulness that like helps an organization sustain. I think one thing we've talked about is like if any single one of us like had our druthers in every single situation, East Fork would be a very different organization, and like the disagreement or the tension that we can come up into on decisions on like growth or acquisition or whatever, like yeah, I think for the frustrations it's induced, I also think it's like a really important limiter and thoughtfulness inducer, and like yeah, so
Yeah, I mean, I think conflict is so essential to business success, and it's just how you learn how to deal with that conflict. I think that we've gotten so much better. We haven't gotten any, like, there's still just as much conflict as there ever was, probably more. We're just much better at naming what it is that's coming up for each person in that conflict and doing what we need to do to move through it and move on. It's hard work. But I will say, even though I was a little mean, like Alex and I are doing really well together. I'd like a backup on that.
we are. Catherine asked, how did you determine East Fork's messaging and tone of voice strategy? Is it Connie's voice that you've employed across all channels? Did you work with an agency partner? It feels incredibly authentic and genuine. Would love to know how it came to be. I think any of us could answer that question, but it's your voice, Connie. Do you want to answer it? And the answer is simply that it sounds genuine because it's Connie's voice. And Connie's a writer and an artist and an activist and all of these things. That's anything but a sort of formally trained executive. And none of us come from that background. So Connie just started typing into Instagram and writing emails and communicating in the way that Connie communicates. And it's obviously, there is a lot of care and thought that goes into this, and there is a tremendous amount of craft behind that. It's not to say Connie just rattles off, the first thing that comes to mind, but it is Connie's voice, and it's Connie's energy and vibrancy, and that's what people feel and see and hear. And there was not an agency. We didn't sit around and say, okay, what's our point of view? Who are we talking to? I mean, we've done some of those exercises internally, but we never, that's how you manufacture a brand. That's how these, but that's just not what East Fork has done.
It's been interesting now that, because we have an incredible copywriter on staff now named Shannon, and when she came on, I think that and when other folks have come on and done some writing in the past, where it really doesn't work is when people try really hard to adopt my voice, where it's like that uncanniness, where it's like, this sounds like someone who's trying to write like Connie. And Shannon has her own incredible, distinct, funny, kind voice. And so we've been talking a lot about how the East Fork brand and what East Fork voice is it's a personal voice. It is one that is, kind of rooted in a similar set of values and but is an individual voice. And so I'm excited to see Shannon writing copy for newsletters and like signing it as Shannon and saying, hi, this is Shannon. So that she's kind of less pressured by that feeling of having to adjust her personal voice. I think that's where things start to get really disingenuous feeling, is when you're like close but no cigar. So as we bring people into the fold, I look more for skills around like language justice and cultural competency and ability to like read a sentence and understand how it's going to impact, like how it's going to land, and being able to like say the right thing at the right time versus whether or not it matches my tone. If that makes sense.
Those are the big questions. We've got a few that are a little easier to answer in the last 10 minutes here. What's the T on spider? There are mugs and seconds, but where are the first? This is from Drew, who always is asking questions. Where the pots are. Well, I can't remember what question you asked last time, but I've been looking at your name for, it seems like many, many years, and I remember.
It's so true.
What's the T on spider? Connie? John? I don't know the answer to this.
Spider, we're just always testing things back there, and we were hoping to be able to right now. So the big, first and foremost, when people are like, why can't you just bring back all the glazes we love? Like it's a physical space issue. We can only keep about 5 glazes right now in constant rotation before things start to fall apart. And it gets overly complicated for storage of materials and preparation of glazes and working it into the lineup. That's really hard because we want to be able to make all, I would love to be able to go back to our entire history of glazes and make new batches of all of the things that didn't really get a chance to get into a lot of people's hands. Spider, we were hoping to be able we were considering bringing a black into the core lineup. And so that was our first attempt at a black. And we loved the color so much. And then we started testing it, and it just was a little bit too matte. It was a little too scratch prone. And then we looked at whether or not we had the resources and time to keep developing it. And we just didn't. We wanted to focus on glazes we knew we could more reliably produce. And so we were like, let's just put it on things that you don't use a fork on and sell the test that we made. But we are definitely considering a black for the future. And when we move into our new production facility in Caribou, and we start to transition some of the machinery out of this building that we're in right now, we are going to be able to open up to having potentially 8 glazes on the line so that we can have an expanded core lineup and then 2 seasonals that rotate through. So that's the answer there. And a lot of it was purchased in our Asheville store and immediately flipped, and it makes me so sad. It makes me mad. Don't like that.
Didn't think I needed to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is scary. I don't recommend every single person going into business with a significant, like a spouse or a best friend. It has been really hard, but also if you have a deep foundation of love and respect, and you're really willing to hold yourself accountable for the harm that you cause on a daily basis, then I think you can work through it.
This last question, how did you find your style as potters? Reading it from the chat here. I've been talking too much. I'm gonna give this one sorry. I'm out of here.
Yeah, no, I've got an opinion on this one, so I appreciate the question. And this is definitely coming from my own unique path through studio ceramics, and there's lots of different conclusions to come to. But I think because I studied pottery briefly in college and then got a job apprenticing with a more traditional potter here in North Carolina, I quickly kind of stepped out of what I identify as the more studio art academic approach to pottery that really, I think, emphasizes this notion of artistic voice and individuality and uniqueness and kind of creativity as this sort of fetishized grail that in order to be a good potter, you have to be unique and have a distinct, recognizable kind of aesthetic or flavor to your work. That in contrast to the apprenticeship model, where Alex and I, we studied under a potter who had in turn studied under other potters, and you were basically just shown how to make a thing and the idea was to replicate it as closely as possible and not like put your own unique spin on it. And I think in human history, like, this is my bias, of course, but I think like that's a much more, if you looked at human history and art and craft, generally speaking, like I think humans have probably approached making things through that lens. That's a much more common way to approach it, as opposed to like this idea of an artist kind of who is this individualized celebrity that I think really plugs into like art markets and, you know, capitalism and money and stuff. So like I think my advice there is just like find stuff that you respond to and like try to make that stuff, and like don't worry about trying to have a unique voice. I think it's a distraction. I think like, yeah, just connect with like meaningful objects and the material, and like don't worry about the ego stuff. I don't know. I've got like a bone to pick with that.
Yeah.
Though Johnny is a type 5 who misidentifies the type 9, so that might play into your approach to your own personal art pathway.
Mm. What is? What do you mean?
well, I mean, just the meticulousness of type 5s and like needing to like gain proficiency in one thing over time, and like to be a master of one thing, and to be like very curious about like minutia. And then also the type, like when you mistype as type 9, of like kind of losing yourself and like not really like understanding like what your distinct voice is.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think I always agree with you when you say that, but I don't know. Then there like has to be like room for the people who are like, no, I'm a fucking iconoclast. Like, I got something to say that hasn't been said before. But I think that, and that like not everybody needs to say like, that's it. Like not everybody has to have something new to say. There's value in.
Yeah. And if you are that person who's like bringing the revelation to society, like do it from a place of like actually having it and not trying to like contrive it. Like, there's this idea of like, we all have to be that thing. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
That's a good place to leave it, I think, folks. Thank you all so much for coming. We'll do it again soon. We appreciate you, and hope it was interesting.